Austin, you gonna say hi?
Yeah.
Say hi. Nothing. You gonna tell him hi? Look, Austin, say hi.
Hi.
Hi. Bye. Okay, that is them saying hi. Austin's new phrase today was hi everybody's. So he was telling everybody's hi, and then Elizabeth had her little toy that she wanted to say hi to if you couldn't understand what she was saying. But today we're going to take something a little bit different, and we're going to talk about worthy women in respect to wives. And I've got a book, and it's titled Worthy Women. I think it's by Jane McWhorter, and she takes wives, daughters, grandmothers, a whole 13 lesson on how we can be worthy women in those roles in our life. And I really liked what she said about wives. So I read it this week, and I took some of her ideas, and that's where I got this devotional from. And she focused on bad wives and good wives. And today I'm just going to focus on a few of the good wives that she mentioned. And it made me think, so hopefully it'll make you think as well. Most of us that are listening to this are a wife, already a wife, were a wife, you're gonna be a wife, or you're wanting to one day be a wife. So I think it is important to look at the Bible and see what the Bible says about being a wife. The Bible has good and bad examples of wives, but today I just want to focus on some of the good examples. So we're going to start with Sarah. So if we go to Proverbs 12, chapter 12, verses 4, it says, "An excellent wife is the crown of her husband, but she who brings shame is like rottenness in his bones." So we got to think about that. An excellent wife is the crown of her husband. And as we all know, Sarah had to leave her home country to go with Abraham. And they lived in tents. Now, I don't know about you, but if Matt came home tomorrow and said, "Okay, Paula, we're moving. We're not taking anything. We're not moving to a house. So we can't take most of our belongings. We can take our clothes, our necessities, I guess. We can take whatever we can put in a bag, and we're going to go live in a tent." I look at him like he was crazy. I've never lived in a tent. I have never camped in a tent. I'm not a camping person. But Sarah did. Abraham came in one day and said, "We are moving, Sarah, and we're going to live in a tent. We are not going to have a home. We're going to carry our home with us." How many of us would say, okay, husband, yes, sure, let's go. I'm excited. How many of us would throw a fit and say, "I'm not doing that"? But Sarah didn't. Sarah, like we said, left her home country with Abraham to go live in a tent. Now, we're not asked to get up and move and live in a tent today, but aren't we asked sometimes to move and relocate because of jobs? Move or relocate because of a school district? Or move or relocate because of, and you all can fill in the blank. We do that, don't we? So if we put ourselves in that situation and our husband comes home and says, "Okay, my job is relocating me to Michigan," how as a wife do we react? Do we make it more stressful on our husband? Or do we say, "Okay, it may not be my first choice, but we will make it work"? Are we like Sarah? Are we willing to go and do what needs to be done? Or do we make it hard? Again, in 1 Peter 3:6, it says, "As Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, and you are her children. If you do good and do not fear anything that is frightening." Okay, this verse wants us to focus on Sarah calling Abraham Lord. Now, the point of this verse is to show respect. It shows how much respect Sarah had for Abraham, that she called him Lord. I'm not saying we need to call our husbands Lord. I wouldn't call Matt Lord. But to me, the amount of respect that it shows that she said that. Do we love our husbands enough to show him that respect? Or do we talk down about him? Or is his name always have a negative sentence attached to it when we talk about him? And also, like I said, do we respect our husbands? But in Proverbs 31:12, it talks about the wife as well. She does him good, not harm, all the days of her life. she, the wife, does him, the husband, good just one day? No. 1 week? No. 1 month? No. All the days of her life. Are we doing good to our husbands all the days of our lives? The next wife I want to talk about is Abigail. She's not one you hear often about, and I don't know if I would have been a good wife as Abigail if I had a husband like Nabal. In 1 Samuel 25, verse 3, it says, "Now the name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife Abigail. The woman was discerning and beautiful, but the man was harsh and badly behaved. He was a Calebite." Abigail was beautiful, and Nabal was badly behaved. Doesn't seem like a good match, does it? How many of those do we know of today in today's world that just don't seem like good matches? Total opposites. We know how the story takes place, so I'm going to paraphrase. So from here on out, for the rest of Abigail, it's going to be Paula's words. So in my words, David comes to Nabal. He needs food, and he sent his servants and said to ask Nabal for food. Nabal says no. This response of no makes David so angry and so mad that he wants to go kill Nabal. So he sets up his plan to go kill Nabal. Now, like most women, they hear about stuff that's going to happen, sometimes before the men. Well, Abigail hears about this. And like most women, Abigail wanted to step in and fix it. She wanted to fix the problem. But she didn't want to tell her husband. She wanted to do it her own way, do it needs to be done, and stop it before it got even worse than what it was already heading towards. She knew nothing good was going to come out of this confrontation. So she wanted to avert the confrontation. So she secretively went and met David and took him a ton of food, and they made peace. So she stopped the confrontation before she started it. As a wife, do we stop the confrontation before it starts, or are we the ones starting the confrontation? This was a good example of a good wife who is embarrassed by her husband's refusal to do right, but was willing to do what she knew what was the right thing. It reminds me of something I have heard all of my life. Many times, a good wife can influence her husband to be mature. Now, we all know the Lord struck Nabal and he died, but we also have heard many stories of how a wife, by the way she lives, has led her non-believing husband to Christ. Are we a wife that stirs up confrontation? Or are we like Abigail that tries our hardest to stop confrontation? Are we leading our unbelieving husbands to Christ? Or are we feeding them more worldly ideas and backing them up in things that are wrong? Do we need to be more like Abigail? The third wife I want to talk about is Esther. Now, Esther is a very familiar story. Everybody watching probably knows Esther. The Bible also describes Esther as beautiful, but she also describes her as courageous as well. She was brave, willing to risk her life, her own life, for her people. She put herself out there to be chosen as queen. She had to have a plan, and a good one at that, and she did. She developed her own strategy and to show Haman's hatred of the Jews to the king. It worked. She became queen, and as a wife, she saved her own people, the Jews. Now, we all know God's hand was in it. God's hand was in it for her to go through the whole beautifying process that they did before the king, before they went and saw the king. We all know God's hand was in it, but still, she was willing to let God work in her life. She was willing to still go before the king. And it reminds me of a pageant. They said that she went through so many days of putting on makeup and becoming more beautiful when the Bible already said she was beautiful. So how much more did she need to do? We don't know. But she did it. She did it. And she did it for what? For selfish reasons? Well, she wanted to save her family. She wanted to save the Jews. Are we as wives trying to save our family? Are we as wives teaching our children how to become Christians? Are we as wives treating our husbands right? Am I, as a mom, showing Elizabeth what it's like to be a godly mother, so that when she grows up, she can see what to look for in a guy and what not to look for in a guy? Same way with Austin. Is Matt raising Austin to look for a good girl, good qualities in a girl? What are we teaching our children? Are we saving our family? Are we making sure we are doing all that we can to make sure that our families are Christians? And then the next two, we don't really talk about. The first one, I didn't really think about at all until I read this book, and it's Noah's wife. We don't know her name, so I'm going to call her Mrs. Noah. Have we ever stopped and thought about Mrs. Noah? She had to have had great faith and a great respect for her husband, like Sarah, the respect for her husband. When Noah came home one day and said, we need to build an ark, and there's going to be a flood. Can you imagine? You've never seen rain before. There's no indication that you would need a boat. There's no other sign except for God telling Noah, hey, you need to go build this boat. And it wasn't something that happened in a day or two or a month. It took over 100 years to build this boat. So you have to have faith, not only in your husband, that you believe your husband, that you believe God spoke to your husband. You also have to have belief in God. Are we like Miss Noah? Do we have that belief? If someone wants to come to you today and say, hey, you need to do this, this, and this, because in 10 years, this is going to happen. Are we going to believe them? Or are we going to say, oh, no, that would never happen? That we would never go through that? What would we do? Noah, we all know that Noah, while he was building the boat, was ridiculed. He was made fun of. He was called, who knows the things he was called. But in my mind, it goes, well, you were crazy. You've lost your mind. You're a lunatic. All day long, they're sitting there day after day, making fun of him, calling him crazy, making fun of his family. Doesn't that take a toll on Mrs. Noah too? Doesn't it take a toll on our family? I know it does if something's happened to our children. As mothers, it takes a toll on us when our children are hurt. But what about our husbands? What if our husbands are going through something? What if our fathers are going through something? Doesn't it affect us as well? It should. Doesn't it kind of make our heart heavy? Make us, I don't know, I won't say apprehensive, but make us worry? Make us, like Abigail, want to fix the problem? So as Noah was ridiculed, so was his wife. And it made me think she was the talk of the town. You go to town and you're buying your goods and you're buying clothes, you're buying groceries, whatever you buy, and you know the gossip mill is just a-going. Can you believe that, Noah? Can you believe that crazy woman for staying with her? Can you believe she's just as crazy as he is? Can you believe she's going along with them? She's off her rocker. She's whatever you all say, whatever the phrase is. I can see it happening. I could see them making fun of her, and what strong faith she had. She stayed with Noah. She believed in God. And there's another part of that I want to bring out too. Not only did she stand by her husband, but who entered that ark? We read that it was Noah, his 3 sons, their 3 wives, and who else? Mrs. Noah. So only 8 people believed in the whole world, the whole land. Only 8 people were saved. Don't you think Miss Noah had a part in that? Was it just Noah raising his 3 sons? Was it just Noah and Noah's sons who had faithful wives? I think Miss Noah played a big part in that. She was a big part in having faithful children. We need great wives today that will work to see their children are saved from the devil, from evil. Are we one of those great wives? Could we be? Lastly, I'm going to talk about the wife, Priscilla. And we all know Aquila and Priscilla. In Acts 18, we see that Aquila and Priscilla took Apollos to the side and told him he was teaching in error. What he was teaching was wrong. Now, I don't think Apollos knew what he was teaching was wrong. So it took a lot for Aquila and Priscilla to go over and tell him and pull him to the side and teach him and show him why what he was saying was wrong. Now, a lot of us today are quick to say, oh, she was wrong. Oh, she was wrong. She did that totally wrong. She read that wrong. She misinterpreted that. It's quick to say that. How easy is it to say, hey, Paula, in your devotional today, you said this, but I read this. So can we talk about it? Can we come and just have a little discussion? I really don't understand what you said. I don't agree with what you said. It's a lot harder to pull a person aside. Now, Aquila and Priscilla didn't walk up in front of everybody, pull them down off the stage, and say, you're wrong. They took them to the side, privately, quietly, and said, what you are teaching is an error. What respect, like we've talked about with Abraham, with Sarah and Abigail, what respect do we have for each other that we are willing to show them the error of the ways? But another thing too, like Priscilla, if someone, well, let's just put my husband out there. If Matt gets up there next week and he preaches something totally not in the Bible, not biblical at all, how many of us women, how many of us wives would know? Think about that. That is an honest question. How many of us would know that if Matt got up there and said something that was not, would say, you all know what I'm trying to say. Like if he said that Noah built a birdhouse instead of a boat. Now, we all know that Noah built a boat. That's a very petty example. But if Matt got up there and said that God told Noah to build a birdhouse, how many of us wives would know that that was wrong? How many of us wives would go back in the Bible and double check? Now, a lot of us would run up to Matt after the sermon and say, I don't think that was right. Matt, I don't think you were right. I don't think you were right. And put a big show on. But how many of us would pull him to the side and say, hey, Matt, I don't think you were quite right on that. Let me show you what my Bible says. And maybe we can get together and see why you were wrong. Again, Priscilla's knowledge of the Bible is my point in Priscilla, the wife point that I want to show. How many of us know our Bible well enough that if someone does get up there, and I'm not talking about just in church, you could be at the workplace, you could be at a restaurant, you could be out with friends. And a lot of times, sometimes Bible comes up depending on what situation you're in. How many of us are going to know, hey, that's not what the Bible says? Even if you're not willing to say it, more importantly to me is, do I know it? Do I know what the Bible says? Am I following? If I don't know it, how am I following it? If I don't follow it, I'm not going to get to heaven. To me, it's all like a staircase. It's all a chain effect. We've got to know what the Bible says. So we need to study for ourselves. So we're able to answer questions, or able to say, hey, that's not what the Bible said, instead of taking another person's word for it. And I think of my kids. Elizabeth, now Austin's not to the age yet, but Elizabeth is, hey, Mama, does the Bible say this? Hey, Mama, my Bible class teacher said this. And we're watching online Bible classes, and they have been great. And we have started our Bible classes online. And we still get those questions. Hey, Mama, why did the teacher say this? Hey, Mama, is this really in the Bible? And we get that a lot, and I don't mind it. And we'll sit down and say, yes, let's look it up and let's talk about it. So if you will, let's say Aquila and Priscilla were team players for the Lord. And why do I want to say that? Because it takes two. You have a husband. We've talked about you. This whole devotional is about being a wife. We have a husband. Are we team players for the Lord? Or am I against everything my husband says about church? Am I against pulling out the Bible and doing Bible stories with my kids? Am I against going to church? Am I against everything religious? I just don't want to talk about it. I just don't, with all that's going on, I don't want to talk about it. Or are we team players? Hey, let's sit down and study. If our kids see us studying, maybe they'll want to study. Or if our kids see us going to church, maybe they'll go to church. If our kids see the daddies leading in worship, maybe my son will want to lead in worship. If my daughters see me being a Bible class teacher, maybe she'll want to go and be a Bible class teacher. Or, hey, mom's involved in the activities. Mom helps plan. Dad goes and buys food for fellowship meals. They cook. Little things like that. Kids watch. And honestly, our husbands watch. Matt sees what I want to be involved in and what I don't want to be involved in. Do I want to be involved in church? Am I being the godly wife, not only to him, to my kids, but even to myself? Do I have my priorities right? Do I apply the Bible to my life? As a wife, we have to be a team player with our husband when it comes to church and the Bible. Do we study? Do we ask questions? Do we push each other to learn more? And do we teach each other? So, in closing, I want us to think about, are we worthy women when it becomes a wife? Are we a worthy wife? Is that a title that we can hold? Are we teaching and raising our daughters, our granddaughters, our nieces to be godly women one day? To be a godly wife one day? So I'm going to leave you with Psalms 31, and I'm going to read verses 10 through 31. And while I'm reading this, I want you all to think, does this describe me? Is this the wife that I want to be, that I am, that I was, or that I need to be? If it doesn't, why doesn't it? What needs to change? And I think we all, and I know I do, we all need to strive to be better, worthy wives. So Psalms 31, verses 10. An excellent wife who can find? She is far more precious than jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not harm all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands. She is like the ships of the merchant. She brings her food from afar. She rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household and portions for her maidens. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hands she plants a vineyard. She dresses herself with strength and makes her arms strong. She perceives that her merchandise is profitable. Her lamp does not go out at night. She puts her hands to the distaff, and her hands hold the spindle. She opens her hands to the poor and reaches out her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of snow for her household, for all her household are clothed in scarlet. She makes bed coverings for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them. She delivers sashes to the merchant. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household, and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also praises her. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. Thank you all for listening, and let's strive to be more worthy women this week, as a wife, or just be a better worthy woman. And I will see you next week.